Hi, welcome to Forrest.Chat SoapBox. Today we're talking with Martine Shepherd. Martine has been coordinating the Save Our Beloved Geographe Bay group for about the last 18 months and heading the effort to get rid of the offshore wind turbines from Geographe Bay. Welcome to Forrest.Chat, Martine.
Thanks, Paul. I came on board with Save Our Beloved Geographe Bay just over a year and a half ago and sort of stepped up in the role as campaign coordinator. Probably about 6 weeks after I came on board. I've sort of had quite a bit of history and experience in campaign coordination in Australia and overseas. So, yeah.
So with campaigning for offshore wind farms or to
So,
remove them? Or?
yeah, so my background is in marine science. So I studied environmental science at Curtin University and ECU. So previous to that, I was also doing sort of advocacy work for the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society when I was living in Canada and doing campaign coordinating there, as well as other projects in Australia. So I'd sort of done a lot of ministerial meetings, campaigning, petitioning, understanding what was really needed to bring it, sort of the campaign together and certainly get up off the ground from day one sort of thing. And the group was started about 4 months before I came on board by Kyle, Suzanne, and a lovely lady named Maureen. And then when we started off the campaign, it was a case of there was a lot of coordination needed. And I just said, look, I threw my hat in the ring and it went from there pretty much. I guess, not only marine science is something that I know quite well, but also having the experience and certainly the confidence to step up and push back where it was required. I'm not a wallflower.
All right. Now, I must apologise there, Martine. I'm using my hearing aids here and there seemed to be a fair bit of cutting out. So I hope that's not coming through on the actual recording, but it means I have missed something. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to swap over to away from my hearing aids and onto my headset because
Sure.
Hopefully, let me just turn off the Bluetooth thing as well. The things you do. We had the joy of tech attempting to get started with this earlier. So
We did indeed.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, so hopefully that'll allow me to hear, and it doesn't. Hopefully, it's not my Bluetooth.
Yeah, the pains of technology. It's supposed to help us, but sometimes it can inhibit or cause more problems than it's supposed to. That's for sure.
Certainly has that potential, doesn't it? And we'll need all that electricity to keep doing that to ourselves.
Indeed, yeah. Some baseload energy be great. Thanks very much, Mr. Bowen. I don't want to resort back to pedal power. I'm pretty buffed and I can go to the gym 3 and 4 times a week, but I'm not interested in being on a wheel to get my power going at the house.
We usually get out and go for a walk, so that's much less vigorous than pumping a treadmill, that's for sure.
Too funny.
All right, I will share onto the screen the couple of questions that we talked about earlier. And there we go, that should show up in just a moment. There we go. Righto. Now, this worked earlier. Now, I believe I can do that from here. Okay, so we started off with these 3 questions right here. Well, 2 are mine and 1 was yours, I think. No, that's the wrong message, isn't it? This one up here. Right, we'll give that a go. Cool. So the question I was looking at was what are the issues with offshore wind turbines and you're looking at what are the environmental impacts and what concerns have been raised by other areas of the world. So that have already installed offshore wind turbines. So let's have a bit of a chat about that, shall we? So
Absolutely.
yeah, oh, I'm getting all these boxes coming up on my screen. That's fine. They're done. So the environmental impacts of offshore wind turbines. What happens? What do they do?
So what we can do is sort of break it down into three areas of the industry itself. So it's pre-construction, construction phase, and operational. So pre-construction, we're talking about marine surveying and acoustic surveying, where they do immense areas or massive areas of benthic mapping. So it's mapping the floor and what's going on with depth, what kind of reef systems we've got out there, which is what we do here in Western Australia, have very, very extensive limestone reef systems that are vital habitat. So we know that that causes major issues. That's evidential from all the environmental groups that are certainly pushing back against the same things that are done for oil and gas. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem that those lobby groups are interested about pushing back against offshore wind, which is super disappointing. I guess they get a lot of funding from the federal government, so that explains that. But looking evidentially across to the US and the eastern coastal zones there, where they've had offshore wind turbines pre-construction and construction operational phase, in operational only a couple of areas, but mostly it's still in pre-construction and construction phase, where they're still doing marine mapping and marine surveying, and that's causing immense death to marine species there. So they've had mass die-offs of invertebrates, in particular crabs. They've had scallops in the scallop fisheries decline by 50% over 3 years, and that's due to the surveying as well as the construction phase in those areas. And then, of course, there is cetacean and whales in particular. There's been abnormal and excessive increase in whale deaths on the eastern seaboard, and that correlates across to what's happened in the UK, where the UK is seeing about 1,000 whale deaths per year. Whale, dolphin, and porpoise deaths. So they all fall into the cetacean group that's being surveyed and monitored, not just strandings but actual deaths. And so when you look at that, if there is immense amounts of abnormal data coming out with strandings and deaths of what you'd call very healthy juveniles and young adults, as well as those that are in their reproductive prime. So it's not end-of-life death. End-of-life death is something that's expected. It's something that's actually quite well talked about in coastal regions and councils, certainly in Western Australia, because there's already a budget for removal of end-of-life whales along our coastline. So we're not talking about fitting into that category. We're fitting into a category where there's abnormal deaths in healthy whales and cetaceans. Unfortunately, in 2023, Jeff Van Drew, a congressman in the US, raised this issue and said that NOAA, who is responsible for the reporting of this, seemed to be, under the Biden administration, suppressing that information and what the outcomes were from necropsies. So that's like a post-mortem of marine animals. So they check the inside of the ears and additional damage to their internal organs, because the way that sound moves through their body in water is very different to us, and that's hence why it's their habitat and it's not ours. That's the primary concern here, is that we're going in and we have absolutely zero idea of what we're doing in their environment. So that's pre-construction. Then we have the construction phase, where pile driving causes immense and compounded trauma to marine animals. And this is where after the scallops and mass crab die-off that happened during the survey, a period happened, and the surveys are still continuing In the US, whales are still continuing to die and wash up on beaches on the eastern seaboard between Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So what's happening is that it takes about 10,000 to 12,000 strikes, depending on the pylons, but around 10,000 strikes per pylon to embed into the substrate in the construction phase for the offshore wind turbines. In that that excessive noise and constant pounding, what happens is it causes such trauma to certain animals that not only are they trying to get out of the water, but it damages internal organs. It also damages their capacity to balance and create equilibrium within their own biology. So they have like specialized organelles, you would probably call it. It's pretty sort of scientific, and it was something that would be pretty much a segment all its own, because we're talking about many different species, but the adaptations of all of these are such that whales have the same thing. So they have inner ears, so that when the bone breaks from excessive noise, and sometimes that excessive noise is outside of their range of hearing because of the frequency. So the noise is very high, but it's outside their frequency range, which means they're going deaf and don't know it. So this is where this compounded trauma that's going on and should have been investigated before this industry was even given the green light. That's what's happened, and we need to learn from what's going on in the US, because it was fast-tracked, just like it's fast-tracked here in Australia. But they've had a massive pushback here because we have been investigating and doing deep dives and researching through the groups in the UK as well as the USA, and seeing that in the UK there's been approximately 5,000 whales, dolphins and porpoises that have died in UK waters in 5 years. That's excessive death. So there usually is about 20 to 25 whales and cetacean deaths recorded along the UK coastal zone. But this is now blown out to something that's astronomical. And what happens is that with such invasive deaths in populations, what will happen is that entire social groups or pods and families of whales will be put at risk. So we're talking about gene diversity and diversity of species, so that if certain pods of females or bulls are the males that are dominant and protect the females, escorting them up and down the coastline to protect them from predators, they start dying off. We have holes in the distribution of population. So we have babies and young dying. So they're not going to have, we have lost sort of that new generation. And then we have young adults again, and they're the ones that sort of help protect each other as well. You know, like they all look after each other, and that's why it's so important. It's such a complex system. I am certainly not a whale expert. I would love to talk to more whale experts online, but unfortunately, many of them are scared off by the factor that funding will be pulled from any of their research worldwide. This is the same story, that if they don't comply with the narrative of the current government's agenda of working towards net zero and massive carbon reduction, and making sure that these installations go in, they get money pulled. So then we've got the construction phase where the pylon pounding causes deafness and disruption. And what you'd say, if you could imagine, it's like bringing home a newborn from hospital and having a jackhammer going on the other side of the wall all day and all night until it's done. You would expect that baby would have some kind of massive trauma that it's experienced. So it would have things going on in its brain. We would have excessive cortisol levels, elevated cortisol levels. Also, we could have deafness that's occurred instantaneously or from the onset of that. So anything that's got to do with causing disruption in any of the natural processes of these whales, where it comes to migration, but also birth, because here in WA in Geographe Bay, it is a birthing zone for whales. So we're very disturbed that this fast tracking has been allowed, and the EPBC has allowed the go ahead and determined that the marine surveys that are going to be done very soon by the University of Western Australia are not controlled, and it should be a controlled action. So
So
very disturbed by all of that.
I can imagine that. Excuse me. I did hear about the surveys were about to or have been approved to go ahead. I don't know where they are actually in the process of actually doing anything, but that's a fairly recent development, isn't it?
Yeah, so the EPBC gave approval to the University of West Australia and determined the exact processes it's going to be using, and even the same equipment is exactly what was used in the Nantucket and Massachusetts area, as well as down other areas of the eastern coastline. And Robert Rand, who is a specialist in acoustics and did a whole bunch of science data and a huge report on this. Anyone that is looking to find out, again, his name is Robert Rand, and you look up acoustic surveying, and it's in the USA. And it's got to do with marine surveying and then pile driving. He has two separate reports, and on both reports it shows that not only did this industry to do with surveying, they went above the threshold that they were allowed to, even by the permissions they were given in the US. It's the same as in Australia. They're the same boundaries. Every time it was the threshold went past. So it went past that threshold, and they still continued to do the surveying, which led to these deaths. So it's not monitored, and there's zero accountability. So they're given an exemption for any litigation. So any harm that comes to, so if we're out there and we kill baby whales, it doesn't matter anymore. If we kill lots of dolphins, of course, the Dolphin Discovery Centre has been a research hub for university students and people researching dolphins and cetaceans all over the world. And it seems to be we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater with this one, because that's exactly where a lot of this industry is going to be coming out of, that same area in Bunbury and going north to where the first construction area looks like it's going to go. But this is where the surveyors will be. They're saying that they're going to try and avoid surveying and annoying whales, and if they see them breach, they'll stop for 30 minutes. And it's like, well, whales generally live under the water. They don't necessarily come out. If it's a choppy day, the visibility will be low. So there's all of these parameters that, you know, this is not an exact science at all when it comes to the surveying, but more than anything, we have science, we have data, we have information already that we know is upstanding, and it's correlating directly to whale deaths that are happening on the eastern coastline, as well as the fact that we know that that has happened on all throughout UK waters, from Scotland all the way down to Wales.
Right, and the surveying is acoustic surveying, is that correct?
Yeah, so it's acoustic surveying. So I haven't got the parameters right in front of me, but the exact, we compared it. So Megan Lapp is a world expert, and she's from the US. So she is an environmental lawyer. So Megan has been working with the US Congress to educate them on what's going on. So she sort of works with the cetacean experts. She knows the legal parameters, and then works with congressmen. And she's been doing this for a decade now. So when I say that I would regard her as probably a world expert, or the world expert on all of the issues to do with offshore wind. I have not only interviewed her at least 3 times, but we speak at least twice or 3 times a week, just to keep in the loop, and also, you know, offer support, because they're going through a lot. They have had a huge impact on the fisheries over there. So what it is that we already have this data that's science-based. It has all the parameters, that exactly what's going to be used by the University of West Australia, and that's exactly what caused the mass death of crabs and invertebrates, as well as it started whale deaths in the eastern seaboard.
That's pretty scary. It's basically like someone coming in with an audible weapon into society. Probably sounds a little bit like what they used in Canberra not too long ago.
Yeah, the RAD, I think it was called. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So all I can say is, as I've likened it to having a jackhammer going near a baby's bedroom, that's exactly what this nursery zone would be. And they're saying that they will stop during whale migration time, and I think that's a bold-faced lie. I don't think there'll be any stopping this once they go ahead, because it's all about getting money on funding from our government, getting those grants and subsidies up and rolling into those foreign corporations' bank accounts. It's nothing but a money grab. It's nothing about energy security. It's nothing about looking after the environment. We know that the destruction that's going to be caused by cutting through and grinding down limestone reef systems, they won't come back. And we know that it causes fragmentation of our vital rock lobster industry. And I know that the people at Bidding Up were outraged from the beginning. All those fishermen, they know their stuff. They're local experts. And that was never listened to by the federal government. Instead of being accountable and saying we're quite ill-advised in trying to sit down and have a discussion with this, they didn't have any experts at all. They just threw together a group that were from the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water, and said, oh, this is who's telling you what's going to happen in your community. And when they said, you don't even know what species are there, that tells you that they are not only ill-equipped to be dealing with the public, they're also grossly unknowledgeable or lacking the knowledge and insight into the complexities of the marine environment. And they didn't want to listen to one of the experts that were in the room in all the consultation process. So that said it all. The fact that it's been reported in this time that Geographe Bay is now a known research, so a research paper that was put forward is peer-reviewed, and it was about knowing that Geographe Bay is a birthing zone for humpback whales. I've seen that myself off the Bidding Up coast. I watched a whale give birth only probably about 10 metres in the water. And then I have so many anecdotal stories by community members all the way from Augusta up to Lake Bidding Up and near Mandurah that said that they've seen southern right whales giving birth as well. So this is in that zone. So we're talking about newborn babies being exposed to this kind of stuff. And when it comes to the whale treaties that we have, signed and agreed to back in the 70s, as well as the EPBC Act of 1999, there are laws and there is accountability for everyone, but now the government is no longer accountable, and it's giving permission to places like the University of West Australia and proponents to not only impede, cause harm, stop the migration, and perhaps kill whales and protected species or protected marine mammals. And so they've given exclusion to that. So they're exempt from prosecution. It's called a free pass.
Very much a free pass, and
disgusting.
The government is like that. They will give themselves a free pass to do whatever they feel that they
sure
need to do. Interestingly, my experience with pile driving is from two different angles. I used to work in a business-to-business company where we sold safety equipment like hearing protection and that sort of thing. And the pile driving side of the hazards in the workplace were extreme from a noise perspective. And this is, buildings.
Yes.
And it was very difficult to protect workers from the amount of noise, the frequency. When I say the frequency, how often the noise occurred, which is like every few moments, but also the sheer volume that the strikes actually put out. And the other aspect, I lived in the towers next to the relatively newly constructed Crown Towers in Burswood. So they were actually pile driving outside outside our apartment, effectively. It was a few hundred metres away, but you heard every one of those strikes.
And if you can imagine,
very loud.
Sound travels a lot further underwater as well, and because of the adaptations of marine animals, in particular cetaceans, but not just them. There are a lot of animals that become very, like I said, it causes imbalance and their movement. They become paralyzed. So any filter feeders will actually clam up. And that's what happened to the scallops in the USA. So that the scallops had so much compounded trauma, they were paralyzed and they couldn't open to filter feed, which means take in oxygen. So they died of hypoxia. So essentially, all of these animals died of compounded trauma. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the most gross negligence as custodians and stewards of this planet when we have laws in place, we have our own acts that people are prosecuted for. I mean, I see all the time that some poor farmer can't even extend his paddock because someone said, no, there's a rare orchid found there, but we can let foreign corporations come in and destroy our beautiful pristine habitats in our oceans and in our land. That's, you know, we're getting rid of national parks. Could you imagine? Farmer wants to put in an extra paddock through a national park and the government probably throws him in jail. But here, no, let's clear it for you and you foreign corporations come in and destroy whatever you like. It's just the hypocrisy, and to be honest, it's a very dystopian, evil agenda as far as I see, that we're killing everything that's beautiful and natural for the sake of this industrialization and technocratic system where, you know, these wind turbines are actually made overseas. They're supposed to be powering our grid. Well, in West Australia, it's a public grid and we own it. So we say, no, you can bugger off. And that's what I keep telling everyone. We have not been privatised like the East Coast, and we need to stand our ground on that. And also they can flick it off with a switch because all of these are like smart turbines. So not only can they turn them off and shut our power down, but then there's all kinds of things, if we're talking about this technology is coming from China, that there is ways to put in there. They have monitoring, so they're smart. So they have smart systems in them, which means that they have the capacity to look around them and send out frequencies or to know what's going on or interfere with radar. Not only do wind turbines already interfere with radar capacity, so there is a real risk there for national security as far as I'm concerned. But then they've got the capacity to do other things through having this smart technology as part of it. That's just crazy.
It's really selling out our security as a country.
In every way.
Yeah. We've seen examples of the technology that's been slipped into, I'll say, renewables, with the USA, where they found the communications equipment inside the solar panel array systems.
Exactly.
And, you know, someone could remotely turn off that power. That's a lot of power to give to some other country. Especially
to China. Like I'm, you know, like it may be the proponent. There's in here we've got, you know, Spanish and some from the UK and stuff. But what I'm talking about is that, and many others like Norwegian, the whole lot. It's like it's a conglomerate of foreign ownership that's coming into our oceans and committing crimes against animals that we try to protect, destroy environments and habitats that, I mean, you know, we can't drop anchors over the side when we go fishing, but we can come in and destroy it and just bring through like grinding machines and trench through there and drop down underwater. Oh, that's the other thing I didn't talk about is the underwater high voltage cables, which cause immense amounts of EMF and superheat the substrate down there. So they heat the water and it changes the mixing and stratification of the water. Also, hot water doesn't contain as much oxygen, so then the EMF causes paralysis in rock lobster and other benthic animals. So it also causes larvae death in all animals. That's not just for rock lobster, but we're talking about, you know, all kinds of fish, octopus. We have the most sustainable octopus industry in the world that won an award that's in this zone. And you're just thinking, these people are insane. Like literally, it's like We are saying that we're going to save the planet by destroying beautiful, pristine habitat and putting in all of this artificial system that will be left there to rot, because we know that decommissioning is going to cost the same as construction plus 20 to 30%. And there's no discussion of that.
No discussion at all. Even you didn't mention it earlier when you mentioned the stages. You didn't mention deconstruction, because
Yeah,
that'll
decommissioning.
be decommissioning, yeah. Because the information I saw about the project, which basically had a timeline, and it was 40 years from inception to grave. And that's the entire project. So that'll be all the wind turbines inside 40 years, because we've already used up a few years of that 40 years to get to this stage.
Well, I propose that that's a lot of gobshite, and sorry that I've just used that word in your program, but it's the biggest load of garbage, because we already know the oldest wind turbines in Australia, which are 20 years old, are sitting there and are not decommissioned because there's no money to do so. And that's on land, so they're not in salt water. So if they think for a second they're going to last 20 years the same way in the ocean as they are on land, these people again are delusional, because there is no way. I've heard from people, they've already had blade breakages off the Nantucket coastline, which closed down massive 22 miles of beaches during the school holiday, like during July school holidays last year. So you've got to wonder, like, why would this government put our communities, our beautiful area that is sacred to us, sacred to fishermen, sacred to holiday makers, people that live there, that just want to enjoy that beautiful, wild, natural environment, do this and put all of that at risk for foreign corporations, foreign profit, not us. We don't make anything out of this. And people go, oh, the jobs. And like, even the jobs, I would say BS to that, because what we do know is that it's a skeleton crew that's left here. The construction crew is usually brought in externally because they're all experts in this field. Probably a lot of them will come from Asia, Europe, and the US teams, and that have been shared around as they already are. And they do that because they don't know if they can trust anyone, because there's such opposition. They're not going to outsource people that are working on these projects to those that they might not be able to trust. And you can see why, because it's become a very heated debate worldwide about the destruction and the cost, the economic cost, not only immediately, but long-term in subsidies, and the fact that value for money, it's just not the way to be going for any kind of baseload energy, and the fact that it's going to inhibit everything that we are as a nation.
Even if we were to totally disregard the environmental aspects that you've talked about so well, even if we got rid of all of those, just the financials don't make sense for Australia.
No. Why? I'm going to use an analogy, and I say this. It's like, if this industry could stand on its own 2 feet, they would not require subsidies and grants. And I'm going to liken it to this, and it's, I'm going from Australia and I'm going to go into Albania. So I've popped myself over to Albania and I've said, hi, I'm Martine from Australia. I want to open up a great big pizza shop. And it's like, actually, it's not a pizza shop. It's like a pizza manufacturer. And it's like, so I want you to find me where I'm going to put it. I want you to pay for that, to pay for everything. And so what will happen is that when I've made all the pizzas, at the end of the year, I might give you a little piece, but all of that is going to be shipped out of this country after I've used up all your resources. And then when I leave, I'm going to ask you to kind of look after the mess that I've made. So thanks very much.
We'll just leave that to you. Thank you.
And so people go, oh my God. And I said, when you make it a tangible, real thing, it's like, imagine people coming in and wanting you to put money up front and to give them money to start their businesses off, and yet you are not going to get anything from that. All you're going to get is all the resources that you're supplying, as in like wheat and your pepperoni and your cheeses. So it's going to take from your market or take from your area and actually not give anything back. That's exactly what this industry does. And it does it time and time again. And if people think this is going to be good for Australia, manufacturing, in agriculture, food security, energy security, they're delusional. And you only have to look at what happened in Portugal and Spain and France. Their whole grid flatlined when they went over. I think they were about 4 hours into the transition to renewables only, and it flatlined. And they said, oh, no, it happened because of some weather anomaly. I'm like, isn't that even more reason to not do it? Because aren't we do it for this climate change we're trying to anticipate? So if we're having more weather anomalies, that's even more reason to not go to this insane intermittent power system that's weather related. Is it just me, or is this not rocket science? But people try to make out that they're super intelligent by being so dumb.
It's just incredible that that they can actually justify how it works. There's got to be something more to it than
there is.
practical justification.
It's all about global agreements. So the Paris Accord that we signed up to for carbon emissions and net zero, as well as the GOA agreement, which is about 36 nations that signed off on the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. And that is where we are stuck, thanks to this absolutely horrendous, tyrannical government that we have. Unfortunately, we have both in this state. We have both state and federal that try to steamroll us. Mr. Cook's been really quiet about the offshore wind thing. Very interesting that. But all I can say is that it's a failing system. It's been seen that way, that proponents just today pulled out and said that they're no longer investing in offshore wind in Australia. So they pulled out of areas in Tasmania and the Illawarra.
So that's today, another company, because there was one last week or the week before.
Yeah, so it's looking very, very dicey. And so the government's going to try and throw as much money at this to try and keep it alive. It's like how much kerosene that you've got going on that fire to keep it going. At some point, you're going to run out of gasoline, Mr. Bowen, and you are going to be blackout Bowen, because people in Australia are not buying net zero anymore. They are seeing all the hidden costs. The fact that every single thing that comprises of their life is going to go up by at least double or triple what it is right now. And we're talking about from food and transportation of food to your car will have an emissions tax. Farmers will be hit with taxes. We've got levies on taxes on this, and it's like any way they can to hit us with carbon. So the question is decarbonisation. So we're carbon, and we know that there has definitely been a decarbonisation agenda in the last 4 years for sure. But the World Economic Forum is very much behind this as a global agenda at we need to reduce the carbon emission, which is absolute rubbish, because we know when it comes to ecological and natural systems that carbon is an essential part of our atmosphere. It makes up a very, very small amount. And even so, the biggest contributor to carbon in our atmosphere are all of those things erupting all around the world right now, which are called a volcano. So as far as Australia goes, we are the absolute, what would you call it? Sacrificial lamb. Australia is definitely a sacrificial lamb for this green renewables. Our impact on carbon emissions is so minimal, it's less than 1% on the whole planet, but they're looking at destroying our oceans and our vital agricultural land, especially in Victoria, for the sake of signing off to the Paris Accord, which is based on modelling by scientists that has no ecological background at all. And when you put that data as this is what I want as the outcome, and you put in a whole data set and you don't allow for the fact that the ocean sequestrates or absorbs more carbon emission in the world than anything else, that all we're going to do is green the oceans and green the land through any kind of increase in carbon. It's actually part of a natural cycle. If we'd stop spraying things in the air, I think that's going to have a pretty good impact of not causing any problems. So I think that that's something that needs to be addressed as well if we're having that discussion.
When we look at the scale of things, I like to use an example where if you're a farmer and you've got like a header for harvesting your crop, or you're a miner and you've got a big truck carting your ore, the actual bit that's making any carbon anyway is just tiny, right? The inside bit of the engine, right? It's not the size of it that makes a difference, it's the bit inside the engine. So if you just think about that, you go, okay, it's the bit inside the engine, it's not the whole thing. So if you then stand next to it and imagine yourself being elevated up into the atmosphere, which is really good, you should try it sometime, then as you look down, that header or that truck becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. The further you go, the less you can see it. At some point it disappears, it's so small. But what does come into view are the oceans of the world. The higher you go, the more you see. And what is it, about 70% of the Earth's surface is covered in water. And that water, as you said...
70%, yeah.
Yeah, that water, as you said, has an immense ability and need to take in carbon dioxide. So you've got these absolutely minuscule, in the scheme of things, emissions happening. Even if there's lots of them, they're still absolutely minuscule compared to the ocean that's actually doing most of the controlling. So the whole concept... Of
course, and that's plankton. So the whole thing that comes down to sequestration of CO2. So absorption of CO2 into the ocean is the biggest carbon sink in the world.
There you go. So it's just a way that people can visualize what's going on, even though, they think that there's a lot coming out of a vehicle or something like that. The reality is, in the scheme of things, it's nothing.
And I guess the other thing is if we think about it, like the entire population of Australia, I think fits into such a small area where they're so distributed, so that carbon, any emissions that we are causing, is actually absorbed by most of the greener vegetation around us, just on land alone. And the fact that, we have all of these very strict rules, regulations and laws for everything else, but when it comes to this industry, there's been very little applied that do stop that. So if this was the oil and gas industry that was going to be causing this kind of damage to whales, and the thing is that you can't quite compare them because, and I'm not vouching for one or the other, I'm just simply putting that discussion out there to look at. We're talking about oil and gas extraction, so it's coming out under pressure. So a turbine is a working engine or a unit where it causes different kinds of frequency, noise, and down into the substrate, whereas the pylons, that's why I hear a lot of people that work on oil and gas rigs have said, you always see the whales come up and they're rubbing their back, trying to get the barnacles off their back. I said, yes, because the noises and the frequencies that are coming out of oil and gas rigs are not the same as wind turbines. They don't cause disruption. So there's a difference. The thing is that the infrasound, the sound that is that lower vibration that's between usually 2 to 10 hertz or 5 to 10 hertz, is the communication between mothers and baby whales, which is the infrasound frequency that comes from the hum of these turbines in the substrate. So it interferes with navigation between a mother and a baby whale, which is called whale whisper. We know that. That's known.
Yeah, so it's almost like there's nothing good about it from a perspective of an environmental side of things, or even a monetary side of things. So really, we have to get past those things in order to make a difference to the decisions being made. Now, I do know that some politicians are actually also wanting to see the end of the offshore wind farms. And
Yes.
obviously there's just the few that are in power that are trying to make it happen. So
I would like to
what are
pose to
their
people,
drivers?
and this
What
is
are their
just
drivers?
yeah. So the one thing is that we're dealing with an area of habitat that we don't know enough of. There's been very little research into Geographe Bay and the very complex interdynamics of species. That's for one. The independent research that used to be done that is no longer funded just for research purposes is now all attached to agenda outcomes. And so funding only goes towards agenda outcomes or the narrative that this is the data we want because that supports this. And this is where we're now looking, science should be questionable. Science should be something you can poke at and go, wait a sec, I think there's a hole here in this data, or this doesn't match up right. If you can't question it, there's something wrong. And every time we question the science, every time we question the economics, every time we question the why are we doing this when we already have such a solid base load energy, and we're already self-sufficient, we already have our own natural gas, we already have our coal, and keep what we have here and really bring in sustainable, long-term, low environmental impact solutions as real renewables, because this is not green renewables at all, then I say to people, then we've got a discussion, because at this point we are saying that it's okay to sacrifice vital habitat and biodiversity to save the planet, which is the biggest oxymoron, because we know that in protecting habitat and biodiversity, we protect ourselves from coming into decline. It's as simple as that. We already know that's the equation. Anyone that has done any kind of ecology knows that is the equation. So if we go against that, we're going against like all of this science and data and systems and acts and everything that we've got in place now that stops us from going down a road we can't come back from. A final thing that I want to pose to people is that the lack of comprehension of what the vital role that whales, I mean, all cetaceans are part of this, but whales play in the substrate. So what it is that without the nutrient dispersal through defecating in the water, and all, even so much as even when a mother gives birth to the baby, those massive amounts of nutrients that go into the water through those processes are vital to the health, the structure of that habitat and what exists there already now, to the point that if we start removing that animal because it has such a massive, and that's why they're an indicator species, we remove that animal that has a massive impact in circulating oxygenated water down through the substrate, then cause mixing from cooler waters to warmer waters. So they perform a whole role by just existing there, that if we allow them to die or decline, we have a real problem with the general health and well-being of a whole ecosystem. That's exactly what's happening in the UK. It's exactly what's happening in the US. In the Northern Hemisphere, so we have the southern right whale, they have the northern right whale. The northern right whale is now down to about 273, they think is the number left in that population. They already know that that whale is going to become extinct. It's already pegged for extinction. And in this day and age where we've already got whale treaties, we already have all these environmental acts, all of this in place, we have allowed this to occur on our watch as guardians and stewards of this planet. And my final words to anyone that's listening to this that has concerns about the future, don't be listening to what they're telling us. Just look for yourself and look what's out there. We already know what is good for us. Don't believe the narratives that we're being told, and if we can't question it. But what we do know is that we have to improve things for things to get better, not cause more damage. It's a very simple equation.
That's amazing. Thank you very much, Martine. We did have a little bit more to talk about from the perspective of what can people do? How can people who are listening actually do something?
apart from joining groups like Save Our Beloved Geographe Bay and No Offshore Wind in Port Stephens and No Offshore in Illawarra and all of those areas. And that's what you can do is go onto the DCCEEW website, which is the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water. And it'll have all the, if you type in there, offshore wind zones in Australia, and it'll have all of those areas. And what you can do is then go online and find out who is sharing the correct information, sharing the real concerns, because each area, so just to explain how bad things are in Victoria, they already have 12 feasibility licenses for projects in the Gippsland area alone.
Wow.
That's bad. And so helping support, you know, the Gippsland community and Victoria in pushing back is also what people can do. So we have become one united group around Australia. It's Aussies United Against Wind Turbines, or Offshore Wind, sorry, my apologies. So it's Aussies United Against Offshore Wind. So we have groups all around Australia that have completely united to stop offshore wind turbines from being installed in Australian waters. And people need to educate themselves because they've been sold a green pipe dream. We cannot rely on weather-reliant technology only for baseload energy. We know that that is going to fail. It's already been proven. And that the fact is that it's not good for the environment, and the damages from area to area are going to be horrendous. So in areas of Victoria, they have a specific, I think it's called the short-finned eel. My apologies if that's incorrect, but they have to migrate like 3,000 kilometres to their mating area where they mate and then they migrate back. So where the high voltage underwater cables are, they won't be able to navigate because they get confused by the EMF. So we know that that's a direct impact. So we're not just talking about whales. We're not just talking about rock lobster. We're not just talking about sharks and stingrays. And we're talking about the whole marine environment is going to be impacted immensely by the installation of all of this. And people need to become part of that group that want to have those discussions. There's a lot of information, but there's a lot of, let's just say, manipulation of data and expectations of what this can perform at. And once you go and start asking the questions of how much it's costing to install this and how much it's going to put your bills up, then I would say it's going to hurt people's back pockets that don't want to believe what we're saying before they maybe change their mind.
Yeah, that's the end goal, isn't it? They're just siphoning the money out of the system for their own use, and
yeah,
the average Australian will have nothing left.
Yeah, and it's all by design, you know. Even the fact that signing local councils up to net zero, so for them to opt out, it has to be a serious attempt. We have had that happen in Port Stephens as well as in the Mornington Peninsula in Victoria. So that's something that I will actually be sort of delving into to do some more research, etc., from my own investigation and interviews. But what it is that councils are now going to be hit with $500,000 plus. We know that the baseline's around about $500,000 from Port Stephens for City of Bustleton. We're looking at the data from them now, and I mean, we're talking about if a council just has to come up with $2 million to pay each year towards offsetting their carbon emissions, who do you think it's going to be passed on to? Ratepayers. You betcha. They have to recoup it somehow.
They only have one source of income, really.
Of course. They're not going to borrow they're not going to borrow from the government for the tax they have to give back to the government and then pay interest on it. No, it'll directly go to rates and other amenities or other things that are connected to the council. People are already hurting. There are homeless people. They're giving out billions and billions of dollars to foreign corporations to come and destroy and destabilise this nation. And yet they can't even look after homelessness. They can't look after our medical system. They can't even put in place support for industries that are good for our nation and at least looking after our farmers. Like, you know, what's going on with that? Like destroying the sheep industry, just destroying food security because of all of this. And people don't really understand the complexity of that, but there's new laws that came in that if it's determined that your land is contaminated by PFAS or plastics from wind turbines or your solar array that, got smashed apart, that'll be seen as contaminated. And because you can't get insurance from that, the insurances have changed. Because you can't get insurance, it's no longer deemed viable to be agricultural land. Who's going to take that off you? Who's going to buy that? The government or some foreign corporation.
Who'll go and do their own thing. I hear that in America there's an area where they grow potatoes, and they already know that if they have put solar panels on those areas, they'll never be able to sell potatoes grown there after the solar panels are removed because of leaching of chemicals.
And so that's where I try and educate people that are wanting to host this. And I'm like, you need to do your research. Do you not comprehend that by hosting this, you are contaminating your land? They're like, oh, what contaminants? I said, have you not seen hailstorms that have destroyed entire hundreds of acres of solar panel arrays? And all that contaminant has now deemed that entire area and any runoff from that as no longer fit for agriculture. And that I hear from all the time, it's like, oh, what, the cattle don't mind it or the sheep are underneath it. I said, right there, if you think that you're going to be able to have your sheep and cattle underneath this now with these new laws and legislation coming out, that's why they want to make sure they had the RFID chips, so that if they deem it contaminated land and you've got livestock on that with those ID chips, you know what they can do from the air. They don't even need to come onto your property.
Well, they can actually
cull them.
That's a nice word, isn't it? Yeah, wow.
Well, they've done that to the koalas on the East Coast to make way for transmission lines and grids. So, of course, they'll come through and they'll just steam that whole area. That's what it's about, identification. And people go, oh, that's not true. It's like, well, they're actually culling on the East Coast to condition us that that's what's going to be necessary. So moving forward, if you've got the RFID chips on your livestock and your farm has been determined that it's no longer fit for agriculture and you've got livestock that are feeding off that land, they're seen as contaminated, you won't be able to sell them. So either what are you going to do? They'll have to be destroyed. That's exactly, I've been trying to warn, and it's not just me who's saying that. There are people all over Australia, including Billboard Battalion, Wade and his team. They are going out there trying to educate people that this is actually what's been put in place. These are the legislations. These are the laws. This is how it all sits. And it's like I've been telling people, stop complying. Stop letting the government dictate to you. Stand on your own 2 feet and don't trust those that have imposed themselves as a middle person, an organisation or a representative for your industry. Stop relying on them to be the ones to represent you. You need to get together by yourselves, your actual industry, those farmers, those people that are either into cattle or sheep and wheat, and need to come together and say, we need to fight back together. But unfortunately, because this middle person is saying they're trying to negotiate, there is no negotiation. There shouldn't be negotiating, trying to keep your livelihood. That it's generational farmers that we need to keep, and they're walking off by mass. They're going to lose by next year 1/3 of farmers by the end of next year. A lot of people have already said that. So that's devastating. Devastating. These are generational farmers. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible that there be that many pushed off by things that are really not real. So having worked in government, there is actually a philosophy around divide and conquer when it comes to having disparate groups come in and from a stakeholder perspective, when they stand up, what they attempt to do is actually combine the groups and say, well, you guys have to come up with, the one thing that your reluctance to do this is premised on, I guess. So instead of having 2 things to fight, they now only have one.
Yeah.
right? And it's
So
all
4 years ago, they had us pegged against each other about who had the jab and who didn't. That didn't really work. There's some people that are still bought into that. And now it's like whether you believe in climate change or you don't. And the thing is, it's like climate is always going to be changing because climatic changes on this planet are part of its natural cycle. So it's like I ask people to justify anthropogenic climate change because you're talking about that thing that's up in the sky, which creates the weather patterns and migrates to across the equator and back, and it causes our seasons, which is climate changing as well. It's like what you're saying is that thing no longer affects or determines what our climatic changes are, that I would say to people that we haven't been taught the right science, and there's such thing as a solar minimum, solar maximum. So when the sun is more active or has quieter periods of time, at the moment it has a massive coronal hole, which means it's spewing out a lot more energy than it normally does. And this can cause all kinds of things. Let's invest science into looking at that and how that affects us. But if you're wanting to talk about climate change, well, what I guarantee you is that deforestation causes reduced rainfall. We know that. That's a very well-known equation. And it's like, it's not rocket science anymore. It's something that scientists took a long time to realize, that taking away so many trees actually stops the formation of rain clouds. And so that's the same thing. It's like we can't use that now as if it's okay to deforest for the sake of putting in this green renewables. I mean, it's pure insanity, really.
absolutely. The other element of removing all the trees is that the runoff is more saline, and your water courses, your sources of water also go off. Thank you.
And so there's along the escarpment all through northern Queensland. We already saw massive erosion and landslides in New South Wales where we had that flooding event. The same thing. It's like we have unusual rainfall, and it's destabilized the whole top of that area. The other thing that I didn't quite get into is for people that are hosting these so-called green renewables, which are not. The expense of dealing with the large plinths and the concrete that'll be left there after construction is going to cost them more than $500,000 to get rid of each one. So if you're hosting 30 turbines, do your math.
Yeah,
30
there's
by
no way.
$500,000. It's like $15 million it's going to cost you to remove that. And if you don't, what's that say about your land? Where is the stewardship here of farmers that love what they do, love animals, love the land? This is no longer stewardship of land. This is just landowners that are now hosts for foreign corporations to come in and do whatever they want. And we've got to stop it. It needs to stop.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Martine. We've gone about the as far as we want to go from a time perspective. So it's been very enlightening having a chat to you about what's going on. It's like anything, when you open the lid, there's a lot more in there than you'll realise. So
there is a lot to unpack.
You've demonstrated there that there's so much going on. And the real challenge for us is working out how we actually disentangle ourselves from the drivers that are causing politicians to take us down these paths and to allow this to happen. So that's a big challenge for us.
The one thing that we're grateful for is there's still massive continued commitment from a number of independents and certainly members that are in those zones that are going to be scheduled for having offshore wind turbines. The one thing that has been great, which is the new Senate addition, is Tyron Whitten. And Tyron has actually put forward that he is wanting, with the support of One Nation, obviously, to put forward to Senate and all of Australia that we need to have a moratorium. We need to have an immediate stop to the offshore wind industry itself. And that's because we have not done the research and we need to revisit from scratch and seeing what's happened overseas, and give ourselves enough time to look at the science, the data, and actually be really intelligent about this instead of fast tracking that and causing ourselves such hardship in the beginning and a position where we cannot come back from, because whale population decline is going to have a massive impact. And the fact that in future generations, having your great grandchildren or your grandchildren turn around to you and say, why did you let it happen? Because they lied to us and told it was good. That's why we need to stand up now and stop it. We need to put a stop to it so we can put the right information, the right science, the right facts in front of people, and not the propaganda that's going on the radio and on TV all the time. The real facts about the damage that's happening, so people can use discernment and their own intelligence to make choices and decisions.
We look forward to people being able to do that.
Me too.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martine. Thanks everybody.
Thanks for having me.
A pleasure. Thanks everybody for joining us on Forrest.Chat SoapBox today. We'll be putting out more episodes as we organise some new guests, and Tyrone, who Martine mentioned just a short while ago, he's definitely on my list, as is Ben Small, our local member for Forrest, and hope to have plenty more on the show as well. We've got later in the year local council elections coming up, so anyone who's a local councillor up for re-election or looking to stand, more than happy to have you on the show as well. Just get in touch with hello@forrest.chat. Thank you very much. Thank you, Martine.
Thank you.